For me, the heart of that dealing with has not been moving beyond. It has
Mm.
been making friends with.
Mm.
It's not been fighting the damage and the pain. It's been saying, wow, this is part of who I am. How can I befriend myself rather than despise myself so much that I feel I have to change to be a different person? Because that's what the bullies said to me. They said, change
Yes.
to be a different person. And I'm damned if 40 years later, I'm going to do the same to myself.
Welcome to the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, a show that reminds you that you are not alone, your experiences matter, and you are not defined by what you've been through. Each week, you will hear from the host and invited guests who have either personal or professional experience with trauma. They will share their stories and strategies for overcoming past wounds and beginning the journey toward healing and wholeness. Now, here's your host, a gifted speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur, Harriet M. Harris.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of You Are Not Your Trauma, the podcast that brings hope, healing, and inspiration to those who have experienced life's most challenging moments. I'm your host, Harriet M. Harris, and I am so glad that you're here today. I hope that this show is an important part of your healing journey. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that isn't discussed very much: bullying. Bullying is a silent predator that often leaves invisible marks that can last a lifetime. And today we're having a candid discussion about these deep-seated wounds and sharing insights on how to gently nurture them back to health. Now, I'm joined today by John Britton, whose life story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. John has navigated some complex life challenges, from the isolation of boarding school at a young age, where he endured intense bullying, to a rich career in performance and direction. John's experiences have created a path of deep self-awareness and healing. John, it is a privilege to have you here today to share your wisdom and your experience about a topic, like I said, that isn't talked about very much, especially once we are out of that school age.
It's a joy to be here, and I'm very grateful to you for inviting me on. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I would love it, John, if you could kick us off by sharing a little bit about yourself and your work as a momentum coach.
Okay, so these days, I'm a coach or a mentor, particularly for artists. I mentor artistic projects, and I write and I publish books and so on. But this is kind of post-pandemic work.
Okay.
I was in India when the pandemic hit, and I had my diary booked up 2.5 years in advance, traveling, teaching, directing. And by the time I got off the plane back from India, my diary was empty. Like a lot of people who worked in the arts, it just disappeared. So the coaching and the mentoring is a reasonably new direction, but it was an important change to make. I knew the change was coming. 2 years before the pandemic, I had a heart attack. I was a physical performer, a very fit physical performer. I trained dancers, I trained actors, I directed physical performance, I worked in physical performance, and I had a heart attack. That in itself told me something really important. And that really important thing is something's not right. I mean, you've got to be some kind of fool not to listen to your body if at the age of 55 it gives you a heart attack.
Right, right.
And I
Understood.
was healthy eating, healthy living, exercise. Oh, part of what I learned in the aftermath of the heart attack and then in the downtime of pandemic was that there was a lifetime behind me of trying not to face deep-seated anxiety, deep-seated pain, deep-seated loneliness, which had caused me to act in ways that were not in alignment with how I want to be acting, had caused pain to other people, and which I think at a really deep level, I had thought, if I can just keep running, I'll never have to face this pain. You know, I've only got to get through another 50 years, only another 50 years. And of course, your system has a wisdom which says to you, time to stop running. And it stopped me. And one of the things I had to look at in that was, why am I anxious? Why am I scared? And it took me right back to stuff that I've known about, but I've buried for years. And luckily, the nature of my work was always about deep level explorations of the relationship between the body and the mind, how we think affects how we act. That was sort of the basis of my training work. So I had the tools, but it's still a pretty big mountain to climb by the time you reach middle age and you think you've got away from your childhood, to find that your childhood is sitting there saying, no, sir, you don't escape me that quickly.
You don't get to go. Yes.
You don't get to go until you paid the price.
Like it's going to always come back. It's never just gone away until you deal with it. And anyone who has ever listened to this show knows that one of my favorite things to say is you're either going to deal with your stuff or your stuff is going to deal with you. But either way, it's got to get dealt with. Right.
And I would always go I would absolutely agree with you. And I would go, for me, the heart of that dealing with has not been moving beyond. It has been making friends with. It's not been fighting the damage and the pain. It's been saying, wow, this is part of who I am. How can I befriend myself rather than despise myself so much that I feel I have to change to be a different person? Because that's what the bullies said to me. They said, change to be a different person. And I'm damned if 40 years later, I'm going to do the same to myself.
Wow. That's powerful right there. How can I befriend myself? I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, John, we're going to take
away. It takes us away from feeling that you're a problem to be solved to turning us into a remarkable, wonderful puzzle to be enjoyed.
I like that. I do. I like that. Well, look, John, we're going to take a very quick commercial break. And when we return, I'm looking forward to you taking us deeper into your experiences and the lessons that you learned from them. So all of our listeners, stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are on an incredible journey together, sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the power of healing. To extend the reach and impact of the You Are Not Your Trauma movement, we've launched the Give 5 to Change Lives campaign. With just $5, you can contribute to developing invaluable resources like our upcoming You Are Not Your Trauma app, healing journal, and expanded podcast content. Every dollar and every share contributes to helping bring healing and hope to more people. We invite you to join this movement. Visit giving.youarenotyourtrauma.com to contribute. Together, we can change lives one heart at a time.
Okay, we are back. Welcome back to You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. If you're just joining us, I'm here with John Britton, and we're diving into a discussion about the deep-seated effects of bullying and the journey towards healing from it. So, John, you mentioned that 2 years prior to the pandemic, you had a heart attack, and that kind of made you, between the heart attack and the pandemic, it kind of really made you want to kind of take a step back and see what was causing you to be anxious and afraid. And you were met with the fact that you had some trauma from the bullying that you had experienced as a child. So if we reflect back to those early years, first off, how do you think attending boarding school really shaped you personally and professionally? And then how young did you begin?
Okay, so I had a very particular history with boarding school.
Okay.
First of all, it was a school that my father taught at.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a good thing to be the son of a teacher.
Daughter of a teacher here, so
yes.
I feel your pain.
Yeah. Well, especially as my dad was a lot older than me. He was 50 when I was born, so he was a real old style teacher. He'd been there all his working life. And although he was a brilliant man, he was known as a crotchety old bad-tempered man, and he would shout at people. I would bear the brunt of that. Also, it was a school that was, I'm not about to attack any religion or whatever, but it was an old style muscular Christian missionary school. It thought it was training people to go out to third world countries, as they called it, to train people how to be proper Christians. That whole missionary zeal thing. It liked rugby, it liked the army, it liked all of this sort of thing. And you see, I was a noisy, arty, drama, music, intellectual boy. I got to the school on the basis of both an academic and a music scholarship.
Wow.
So, I was a bright little kid, but I was also nonconformist and arty and scruffy, hair everywhere back then. And
so you rocked some boats, is what you're saying?
I did. I don't even think I rocked boats. I think I just wore a neon sign that said Target.
Wow.
Absolutely. I was little. I was weedy. I cried easily. I loved showing off and being the center of attention until I realized that, being the center of attention wasn't such a good thing in a place like that. So it wasn't so much that I rocked boats. It's that in a place like a boarding school, where you have to remember every kid in that school, every single kid in that school has been ripped from their family and placed in an institution where there is no love. There's a psychologist called Joy Shavarian, psychoanalyst, very important writer about boarding schools. She didn't go to boarding school, but many of her clients did, and she started research. And she says, there is no difference psychologically for a child between being sent to boarding school and being sent to an orphanage, except the child in the orphanage knows their parents didn't want them to go there. But the child in the boarding school knows that this hell, this loveless hell, is what their parents chose for them.
Wow.
So the very fact of every child in that boarding school is floundering. Even if they don't think they're floundering, they are floundering. And one of the things they do to stop floundering is that they band together against people they consider to be outsiders, weird. There was one boy of color in our school, a Nigerian boy, and there was one woman, because there were girls in the sixth form, who was, I believe, from India, possibly Pakistan, but certainly from that area.
Okay.
They were given hell for the simple reason they were an easy target for frightened young people to bond together to attack. Now, I didn't suffer the racism, but I suffered a different thing, which was weirdo, arty, freak, inevitably called gay, and all of these things, and that on top of the emotional or psychological fragility caused by being sent away to a school in the first place, Yeah, that's a pretty big thing. And I don't want to sit around claiming, I'm all sorts of victim, because it's part of who I am.
Right.
But I think we should acknowledge, same happens when kids are sent away to elite sports camps or army training. They are ripped away from the fabric of love.
Yeah.
And we
That's
need a fabric of love to grow up in.
Yes, agreed. I agree with that. And so what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if I'm getting this all wrong, is that where in your experience you were dealing with kids who were banding together to highlight the people that were different because maybe it made them feel better, right?
Yeah. I think it's absolutely, if everybody is experiencing an absence of love and an absence of connection, the way to solve that is to find people to connect with. And they connected with each other. Of course,
in the most negative way.
And for them, it was a survival choice. They were trying to survive. I don't condemn any of the people who attacked me, because they were trying to survive. I might condemn the system which permitted that to happen. Right. And I might condemn the teachers, and this becomes very complicated because my father was one of them, who permitted that system to thrive. But the kids, just, I guess, like gangs on the street and so on, they are saying, how can we be held in a community? And that's a soft and lovely liberal way of putting it, but that's all they're saying. They're saying, who's my gang? Who's my people? Yeah. Who's got my back? And if you have your back protected by attacking that person who's a freak anyway, that's a smart move. The bullies were smart.
Wow.
They got their backs protected. And I can't blame them, because they were lost and loveless, as was I.
This is a very interesting perspective that you shared about, boarding schools. And I really, I wrote down the comparison between the orphanage and the boarding school. And I just find that very interesting. It's very intriguing, because I would have never thought of it that way, but I can absolutely see how it's similar, and how, the difference between, basically desire, the parents' desire for them to go for boarding school, and it not being a choice in the orphanage. So,
and another way that there's a parallel there, and I wouldn't claim that they're the same thing, right, but their parallel is that some of the children who thrive at boarding school are the ones who, by going to school, were escaping an even more dysfunctional family background. So some of the kids went to boarding school and went, hallelujah, I'm away from that crazy place. Similarly,
so
I'm sure there's
exit for them.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some kids who go into care or into boarding school, into orphanages, for whom it is an escape from intolerable and abusive pain. But the majority who are sent there, I mean, again, it sounds, from the perspective of being an adult, it sounds strange, or even a bit, pathetic. But at the age of 8, I wasn't allowed my teddy bear. I wasn't allowed to stroke my cat. I wasn't allowed to run around and say silly things. I wasn't allowed to go to my mum when I was feeling upset. And, my mum wasn't exactly the most, tactile of people, but she was there,
Right.
And at the age of 8, that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a 7-year-old, so I get it. She'll be 8 in a couple of weeks, but so I completely get it.
And of course, one of the things that among boarding school survivors it's talked about is, how could somebody who was a mother with a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, I was sent away when I was 8, Although even that was complicated because I'd see my dad every day at school, but he wouldn't talk to me. And then I'd see him get in the car to drive home to the home that I wasn't allowed to go to anymore. So it was kind of really complicated. But, boarding school survivors ask, how could you, a mother say to your 7-year-old, here's a little suitcase.
Oh,
I'll see you in 3 months. And when she wrote you saying, please, 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 please come and get me, you go, it'll do you good.
No, I couldn't do it.
I bet you couldn't.
I have a 19-year-old in college, and he left going back to school this morning, and I was like, I'm gonna miss you. And he's like, Mom, I'll be back in like 2 weeks for Christmas break. And I'm like, but still, you're gonna be gone. And he's like, okay, Mom. Okay. So I couldn't imagine. And I understand that there are different circumstances for different people. So no judgment on my end. However,
part of the reconciliation in adulthood is also like I absolutely respect the decision my parents made. My mother came from utter poverty, as poor as I've heard of British people being, single parent family, and her mother single parent, abject poverty. My father came from an alcoholic and not quite abject poverty, but certainly a poor background. They gave me everything they had ever dreamed of. My mum left school at 14, unable to read, and was kicked out of home at 15 because she brought a policeman in to stop her stepdad beating her mum up. And her mum said, you're out the house. You can't stay here. The mum threw her out. They sent me to a boarding school. It was a dream come true for them, what they were offering to me. I can't condemn that. Right. I regret it, but I can't condemn it.
Because they did what they thought was the best thing at the time, right? So
absolutely,
we definitely can't do that. I get what you're saying here. Yeah. Well, I know you shared a couple of things, some of the ways that the kids kind of ganged up, right, on you. But can you go into some details if you're comfortable and just share some of the challenges that you faced during your time at boarding school, especially regarding the bullying that you experienced?
So the bullying was, intermittent, but because you never got to go home, the threat of the bullying was always there. You'd sleep in a room with 4 or 5 other boys, and sometimes you'd get all the hell knocked out of you at 2 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes you get into bed at 10, 9:30 at night, whatever time we had to go to bed, and find that people have poured water in your bed. Sometimes it would be weeks where things were calm, fine, and then smack on the back of the head as you're walking down the corridor, and you don't get to say, hey, don't do that, because you're the lowest of the low. If you stand up for yourself, you're just asking for trouble. And so there's the psychology of it is more powerful than the physicality of it. I got hit a bit, quite often. That passes, it passes.
Yeah.
You go, that hurts, and you cry a bit, and then it's gone. But the psychology is different. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, but when you say that you never got to go home, so you didn't get away from it, so it was always kind of maybe this is a question, sorry. So was it like this, always this kind of like lingering wondering of when will it happen again? Or am I safe?
No, yeah, absolutely. And we started off this conversation talking about how the heart attack brought me face to face with anxiety. You want, explanation number one for anxiety is spending several years of your adolescence not knowing whether you were safe when you walked into a room. And the rest of your time as an adolescent, lonely and learning with every passing day that you were not acceptable. You were a freak. You were abnormal. And, working through this stuff, one of the most powerful insights that came to me, and this is mainly through writing. I publish articles on Medium and things like that, where I often am working out some of my own thinking by writing.
It's a great way to do it too.
Yeah, it really is. I do it sometimes just through sort of thinking as I walk, because I live in a remote place now, so I walk in, on the beach most days and so on. But I do a lot of thinking through writing. But one of the most powerful realizations was this. I had an image. I wrote about this on Medium. I had a memory of standing on the steps that led out to the sort of the playground in the school. And I'd been walking down the steps, and suddenly there was a group of about 20 boys below, and they were all pointing up at me and laughing at me and insulting me and so on. And I started playing the fool. I was a bit of a drama person. So I went, I'll play the fool. I'll make them laugh at me, which is a very common response, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
But I had this realization that I desperately, like we all do, I desperately wanted to belong somewhere.
Yes, agreed.
Now, that group all belonged together by virtue of the fact that they despised me. That's what held that group together. And if I was going to belong to that group, I had to learn to despise myself. The only way I could fit in was by genuinely, not pretending, genuinely learning to hate myself in the way that they hated me. And that's a place of complete dissociation where you go, I must simply stop being and valuing all aspects of myself. I must negate myself. I must erase myself, because that's the only way that I can belong. And my feeling is that the need to belong for humans is stronger than the need for, self-respect. We will do almost anything to belong.
Wow. That's very interesting. And I can see how, I can just see it. Like I can see even from some of my own personal experiences, I can absolutely see that. And that's why it's so hard sometimes for people who've experienced some sort of trauma to love themselves fully or wholly, to feel like they're enough, to feel worthy or valuable, because they almost take the position of the person that brought them harm in order, because that's how they begin to see themselves, right?
You put that really well. And so the step beyond that, which we sort of mentioned earlier, the step beyond that is, for me, is never about fighting. I don't believe we should fight other people or fight ourselves, but it is about saying, no, I reclaim. Years ago, I was on the beach, really before the heart attack. I was on a beach in England, and my partner, I sort of saw a noisy little boy, who's being really annoying, a blonde-haired boy, and I went, oh, look at him, he's being a real prat. And she said, I've seen photos, that looks like you.
Oh,
that was devastating to go, yeah, I am still hating on that funny, noisy little boy. The reclaiming is to say, hey, boy, you're okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And,
give that inner child some credit.
I'm saying, I know we've changed, I know we've grown, and I know you hurt, but there was nothing wrong with you. And even the bits that annoy me about you, and there's plenty that annoy me about myself, plenty of things that make me go, oh my God, I really annoyed myself still and in the past. But even those bits are valuable parts of what make me who I can. It's coming to learn to love your dark side.
Absolutely.
To learn to love the awkwardnesses. And that's about saying, these things made you attack me.
Yeah.
That's not my problem.
I love that. Not my problem. So, John, tell me, how did what happened? Like, you went through boarding school, you grew up, you went on to work with artists, doing some acting yourself. You were doing all these other things, and then you had this heart attack, right? We went through the pandemic. If you look back, how did what happened in boarding school, the bullying, how did that manifest in your later life, in your career?
Deep level stories that I told myself about the world and who I am in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Stories like, I'm not acceptable. Stories like, I don't belong. Stories like, groups don't like me. Stories like, don't speak up, because if you do, you'll get smacked.
That's the one.
Yeah, it is. And when I say speak up, I don't necessarily mean, I demand this and that and the other. I just mean, don't own your voice. And, I was busy. I was always the most important, or not, I was usually one of the most important people in the room when I was working. I'd be running the workshops. I'd be directing the production.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow there was a me that was going, make sure that you remain acceptable.
I can feel that, honestly. I worked in corporate America for years, and I was often the person that would sit in a room and I'd have ideas, and it would take me the longest time to get the courage up to actually say it out loud. And then the moment someone was like, say it something against it, or I would just kind of and I had a mentor once that told me, she said, you have good ideas. And actually it was two people and I kept getting the same message. He's like, you have really good ideas. You have to stand firm behind them. But it was hard. It was really difficult because, for one, it was already a battle for me to get the darn thing out in the first place. It was an internal battle. But then once I got it out, it was like, oh no, they must not agree. They must not think it's a good idea. So I'm just gonna sit back and not say anything else. And it was hard to step outside of that.
You say something, I think that's really important. It's a double thing, isn't it? It's not only having the self-confidence, I suppose we could call it, to be or say what you need to be doing, but then the gentle self-confidence that when that is questioned, not to buckle and collapse. I would often say what I needed to say, but when somebody went, yeah, really, I'd go, yeah, they're right. I'm not right. They're right.
Yes.
Or still trying to make the group like me by denying the validity of what I had said.
Absolutely. And not being, because it's like, for me, I would say, I was like, just not confident enough, right, to stand firm in what I had to say. And that definitely, as I began healing, was something that I had to work really hard on, and letting my, whatever that statement, that answer, yes or no, or, how it's more in depth, but just letting that be, and then feeling confident enough to keep going, to share and explain, because I didn't come up with it with nothing behind it. I just had to be confident enough to believe in myself. And that's really where it was for me, the believing in myself. That was the part that really hit me one day. I remember I was on the phone with my brother and I was taking a walk, and I was like, kind of frustrated, and I was like, and I was complaining because, I was like, I think it was my husband I was talking about. It's like, he seems like he didn't believe in what I was saying. And then someone just kind of hit me and was like, well, why do you want somebody else to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself? And I was like, because it was, literally, it felt like a whisper in my ear. And there's no one out here, in this park but me. And I'm like, sometimes I have these moments where things come into my brain and out my mouth before I can, process them. And that was one of those moments. And I remember hearing it and then immediately saying it to my brother on the phone. And I'm like, oh crap, I gotta, it was like, this is a moment I gotta work through. Like, what does this mean? But that was really a pivotal moment, because I think that was the moment that I truly began to understand that it was all in here. It had to start in here. The change, the shift, all those things had to start, inside of me.
Well, such truth in there. There's that quote, which I think is from the French writer Anais Nin: "We see the world not as it is. We see the world as we are."
That's true.
I emerge. You see, one of the things that's important for me about healing is to understand that I emerged from boarding school having learned not to trust people, having learned not to make eye contact, that I was a loner, that I was a freak. And I could look back and go, those are terrible lessons. They're not. They are great lessons. They are what enabled me to survive. I was so smart. I survived.
Yep.
The problem is, if you continue to live by out-of-date survival mechanisms, the temptation is to go, I learned the wrong lessons. No, I learned the right lessons.
At that time,
what I didn't do quickly enough, although it's a process of the last few years, is learn the new lessons.
Oh, I love this. I love this. I love everything you're saying, because
we learn
so accurate.
We learn the new lessons by quietening the mind and opening to experience without opinion, without judgment. Just say, if I say something and this person disagrees with me, it doesn't mean anything except the fact they have a different perspective. Maybe they hate me. Their problem, not mine. Maybe they agree with me, but they're playing devil's advocate to provoke some ideas. Great, we'll have a good conversation. You don't know what anything means, so stop leaping to conclusions based on the traumas you carry from the past. Instead, become present, open, and accept that we're here every day to learn the new stories. What's the story of today? I carry with me the story of yesterday, and I'm grateful for it because it's got me this far. But what's the story of today?
That is absolutely right. Oh my gosh, this is so interesting. I had this conversation, I'm trying to remember who with, I can't remember quite, but I had a similar conversation just about my, inner child, and, how I felt like she protected me, with all of those things that you mentioned, those fears, those, I'm a loner, some of those same ones were my experience. And it was, like you said, what I needed at the time, but knowing that, okay, you've done your job, you carried us well, but now it's time for me to take over with a new outlook and move us forward. Yeah. So I like it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. This is great. So John, tell me, what advice would you give someone who, is struggling with the after effects of bullying? And I kind of want to take a pause before you answer that, because what I want to express is that we know bullying is really prominent in like schools, especially like elementary, junior high, and it's a big deal. But there are other levels of bullying, and I want people to acknowledge and understand that as we continue this conversation, to consider that if they've experienced some in workplace bullying, or if it's a social type of bullying, that if you're still struggling with it, then you don't have to stay there, right? So I want to kind of preface that, because I don't want them to think that we're just talking about childhood or school bullying, but any bullying. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling with the after effects of it? Because we know, as you mentioned, that it can last throughout life until you shift the way you believe and think, and the way you are treating yourself.
Well, first of all, I agree. And I want to reinforce bullying, which has many different names, but it is basically the fundamental way that humans bond together and punish other people.
Mm.
And all of us, I think every single one of us at various times of our life have been bullies.
Mm. Yeah.
It's not something they over there do.
Right.
When 10 people become outraged at the behavior of an 11th, even if that behavior is appalling, and they band together to condemn that person, they are bullying, as opposed to engaging with compassion.
Mm.
Bullying is the denial of compassion.
Yeah.
And we've all done it. I get furious politically. And, I can easily enough, I live in the middle of nowhere, there's no one to band together with, but I could easily enough band together with people to condemn those people I consider bad.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter your politics, whether you're a liberal, whether you're conservative, whether you're religious or not, groups get together and they bully the outsider. They might not want to call it bullying, because bullying is something that bad people do. But no, bullying is something that we are all in danger of doing every single day. So, first of all, my advice to anyone who has or is experiencing bullying is you got caught up in something human. It is not a reflection of any unique failing on your part. It happens, and this time you happen to be on the raw end of it. And that doesn't diminish the pain, because it hurts, I guess, 10,000 ways. But do not let the bullying make you think you are abnormal.
Yeah.
Secondly, I would say, do what you need to do to survive. Whatever you got to do, survive. You may not be able to stop the bullying.
Yeah.
It may be bigger than you. You try, of course.
Yeah.
You go to the systems, go to the managers or teachers or whatever, try, but you may not be able to do it because you can't stop the wind, you can't stop the rain, and sometimes you can't stop human group behavior. It's just how things are. So do what you need to do to survive. Thirdly, I would say, as you manage to be outside the context of bullying, temporarily because you go home from school, or you go home from work, or permanently because you've left something behind, be aware of the danger of still seeing the world through the eyes of someone who is being bullied. Because if that's what you do, you are letting them bully you still.
Oh my.
They made you feel terrible yesterday, and you are letting them make you feel terrible again today by continuing to believe what they taught you. So always look through fresh eyes. And the fourth thing I would say, and I would say this to everybody, it's at the heart of my coaching and mentoring work: be gentle. Don't fight. There's nothing to fight about. Just be gentle. Observe yourself and let your pain be there. Laugh at your folly. Forgive your stupidity. Make friends with your devils. Whatever it is, just be gentle. Because if you are not being gentle with yourself, I'm not saying you don't, just saying it doesn't matter. Do the work you got to do to thrive.
Yeah.
But if you decide to go to war with yourself, what possible good is going to come from beating all kinds of hell out of yourself in one way or another? That's what the bullies were doing. It. Don't repeat it.
Yeah. Don't treat yourself like the bullies did.
Yeah. And if you can find it in you, understand that the bullying wasn't about you. It was about the needs that the bullies had to fulfill the emptiness within themselves. Now that's hard because that takes compassion for people who've hurt you, but we can move towards saying, I don't condemn the bullies. They were just in pain, and I was the painkiller they took. And I didn't much like it, but that's just the way people are sometimes.
You know, John, I appreciate these tips because you took me back to fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and just really, especially the one that says, you know, once you're outside of it, stop seeing yourself in the eyes of the bully, like look through fresh eyes. That was pretty powerful for me, who experienced some bullying in elementary school myself. And just that reminder. I mean, honestly, I had a quick little flashback to a couple of classes where I had some really bad experiences. So, but really just thinking about this in the way that you explained it, these tips are really helpful. So, you know, it's my hope that our listeners who have experienced or who are experiencing bullying will really take heed and, you know, take the advice that you just shared, because I think it could be very helpful. It's doing a number on my brain as we speak. So
I'm really pleased about that. I would add one more thing just to the whole thing, just
sure.
as a big overview of everything. Alongside be gentle is be patient. Healing takes time. It doesn't.
Yes.
You talk about being in the park on the phone to your brother. You have those revelations, but even that takes time, because then the next day you've forgotten it, and then it comes back stronger, and then you forget. Just be patient. You know, get on with your life. Healing takes time. Try to smile as often as possible, and don't beat yourself up just because you've taken 2 steps back. There are still days, and it's 40 years since I left school. There are still days when that little child is strong in me and he's scared. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. He'll always be there, you know, but it gets better. It does get better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for these tips. Again, I hope our listeners have taken notes because I feel like these are very powerful. We're going to take another quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back so that we can wrap up today's episode.
You have every right to be successful. You have every right to be happy. You have every right to live the life you dream of. But your negative thoughts are holding you back from achieving those things, and it's time to stop listening to them. Sound familiar? If so, then this book is for you. Stop Stopping Your Success, a guided journal to break free from the negative thoughts holding you back from your dreams, is available now on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Or get an author autographed copy at www.stopstoppingyoursuccess.com.
Okay, we are back. John, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. We've traveled through some really heavy memories, but in doing so, we've also uncovered some pathways to healing and hope. You've reminded us that our past does not define us, and there is strength to be found in the most vulnerable places. So, John, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
It's simple, really. I work a lot with the notions of presence. I've even written a book on presence. It's you know, at the heart of everything I do. What is it to be present? And I have 8 principles of presence that I work with. And the first principle, which people always think sounds just all soft and lovely, is this: right here, right now, you're good enough. And that sounds lovely, doesn't it?
It does.
Until you go, am I good enough in my anger? Am I good enough in my sorrow? Am I good enough even though I'm still hurting? Am I good enough even though I'm letting that person who hurt me 20 years ago still hurt me? Am I good enough even though I'm failing to achieve the things I want to because I'm holding myself back? And my answer is yes, 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 yes. You are good enough today to take your next step. Even if you're in the darkest places, struggling with everything, you are good enough today to take your next step. Even if your next step is only getting out of bed, looking in the mirror and saying, okay, I believe that tomorrow will be better. And when you hit the valley of darkness, you suddenly go back in and everything overwhelms you again. You're still good enough. And the image I use when I'm talking or coaching people is just this, that however flawed or broken or twisted out of shape we might feel, think of a tree. A tree is perfect. Every tree is perfect. And just because it's perfect doesn't mean it doesn't grow every day towards the light. Every day it grows a tiny bit towards the light. It's good enough to sprout a tiny bit more, even if, like my oak tree, which I planted a little while ago in the garden, it's sitting there dormant. It's good enough to just survive the cold, because there's going to come a day in the spring when it goes, hallelujah, it's time to double in size. So right here, right now, you are good enough.
You are good enough. I love that. Absolutely. And that is honestly a constant reminder I think that we all need, is that remembering that we are good enough. So thank you. Thank you for that. And John, just again, thank you for coming on the show and for being vulnerable enough to share your truth, because it is my true belief that our lived experiences are the ones that help people the most. We live in a society where a lot of times people are encouraged to, keep things to themselves, or they're out of fear, out of, thinking that people are going to judge them. They want to keep what they've gone through to themselves. And I think life is just so much better when we can help someone through what we've already lived through. So thank you for this. And it is really and truly my hope that if any of our listeners have experienced bullying at any point in life, or if they're experiencing it now, that this has helped them know that they aren't alone and that they aren't defined by that experience.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a little challenge for our listeners, because I like to do that now. So here's a question for you that I want you to ponder and perhaps share if you'd like. But what does healing look like in your life? Now, I want to invite you to share your reflection stories with us on social media using the hashtag #MyHealingNarrative. And be sure to tag You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And you can do it on Instagram. You can do it on Facebook. You can do it on TikTok. We're in all those places. And just know that your share could help someone else. So I look forward to your inspiring stories. Now, as we wrap up this episode, I do want to leave you all with this thought. Healing is not just about mending what's been broken. It's about rediscovering the wholeness that has been there all along. So let's take that thought with us as we continue through our healing journeys. Thank you, everyone, again, for tuning in to this week's episode of You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to share it with someone who can benefit from the information that's been shared today. Also, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. You can check out the website at www.youarenotyourtrauma.com to leave feedback, request to be a guest on the show, subscribe to the show, and get information on show guests, or to get information about advertising on You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. You can connect with You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at You Are Not Your Trauma Podcast. And if you have a story to share, please email me at contact@harrietmharris.com. And until next time, guys, please remember that you are not your trauma.